When we are doing business, of course, we are going to use all what we have learned all our lives, right? Make our own ways.
I 100% agree with you, but I just want to push on one thing, which is that the circumstances that you experienced shaped you into who you are today. And we really simply put help you take the data that you already have and use that data for sales and marketing. So any sort of user, whether they're technical or not, can run marketing campaigns using their data. Our perspective is like, instead of
Mhm.
having more staff, we wanted to have fewer staff that was very like, skilled. Senior. Yeah,
Capable.
exactly. And I think in the early stages you want to maintain that flexibility because you want to have folks that can change the product roadmap. Sometimes extremely good engineers that are not in San Francisco, and we're now easily able to hire them. So a lot of our engineering staff today is actually in like Southern California or New York.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ali. I'm the CEO of Al-Burraq Technologies, and today we have another tech star with us, Kashish Gupta. How are you, 30 under 30?
Hey Ali, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so much excited to host
Thanks.
you.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, Kashish, it will be great if you can give your introduction and so that our audience can connect with you and they can know more
Sure,
about
really
you.
happy to. So I moved to the Bay Area in 2018, right out of college. And I guess before that, a little bit of background on myself is I was born in India, in Haryana, and moved to the US when I was about 5 years old. My dad was in IT consulting, so we moved around a lot of different cities in the early days. We lived in New York, in Illinois, in Texas, and then finally settled in Atlanta. And so I learned English probably around first grade, and really started like
Right.
understanding really what was going on in English like around middle school. Then eventually grew up in Atlanta, went to school in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania, and moved to San Francisco right out of college. And at the time, I was supposed to be a venture
Right.
capitalist at a firm called Bessemer Venture Partners, but I just had a feeling in my heart that I needed to be in San Francisco rather than in New York. And I knew that people in San
Um,
Francisco inspired me more than anyone else in the world. And kind of took the bet that instead of living the venture capital life, I would move to San Francisco and figure out what was next. So I actually moved to San Francisco in 2018 after graduating without really any immediate plans. And at the time, I was both searching for a startup job as well as I had this idea for a travel company that I was sharing with my friends and different investors. And eventually, I think the travel company started taking off faster than the job search and it became full time. So since then, a lot has obviously changed.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so a lot has changed since then. I eventually met my co-founder Tejas through a group house that we lived in together, and my other co-founder Josh as well through the same house. Did Y Combinator in 2019, raised a small seed round, pivoted many times afterwards, and in 2020 during COVID, we found ourselves working in the data space, eventually building what is now Hightouch. So it's been a great journey where we've had really many different business ideas, three co-founders, and since then we really picked up this current business in 2020, and it's just been a really fun ride to grow that business for the last 3 years.
Right. That's an amazing journey. Tell us more about Hightouch as well, what you are doing in Hightouch, and you are the
Yeah,
co-CEO in Hightouch,
absolutely.
right? So tell us more about
Yeah, so
that,
Hightouch is
right?
a data activation platform. We really simply put help you take the data that you already have and use that data for sales and marketing. So any sort of user, whether they're technical or not, can run marketing campaigns using their data. And the original idea was reverse ETL. So instead of getting data into the database, our job was to take data from the database and get it into your SaaS tool, whether that's Salesforce, HubSpot, any sort of marketing cloud advertising tool like Facebook or Google. We would help you build pipelines out of the database into your different marketing platforms. And over time, it's kind of transformed. We started with that more technical product and eventually transitioned into building products for marketers that allow you to visually segment your data, run analytics on that data, and run journeys on that data as well. So now it's really a full scale marketing platform where marketers log in. They can play around with their data, slice and dice, and run marketing campaigns end to end within our platform. And we've been pretty lucky to work with some of the largest brands in the world. So we have, I think in India, we have Super Daily. And then in other parts of the world, we have like some of the largest luxury retail brands. We have some of the largest like music labels. We have companies like PetSmart, GameStop, Calendly, Grammarly. All of these types of brands are running their marketing campaigns using our product.
Right, right, right. That makes a lot of sense, and that makes a lot of business as well. I'm so happy to hear that. When you are dealing with the data, policies regarding data
Hmm.
are changing
Hmm.
very rapidly. So, how is that affecting the business of data and analytics and tools related to that, AI, ML efforts, which are put in the data manipulation? How are these policies affecting?
Yeah, so I think the number one change is that it's more important than ever to own your own data. In the past, you could delegate ownership to some other third party because, for privacy and compliance reasons, that was allowed. That's no longer allowed. You need to have ownership of the data. You need to be able to opt out your users if they want to opt out, and you need to have full control over that privacy and governance. So, in the past, whereas folks did rely on Facebook and Google to kind of be this kind of privacy management, they're no longer able to use third party pixels on their websites to track user information, right? So, the high touch premise is basically that the data warehouse should be the center of gravity for your data. And the more people are following things like GDPR and other security policies, they have to comply with owning their own data. And that means the best place to do this is always going to be the data warehouse. So I think like that policy change has influenced how quickly the data warehouse is getting adopted, especially in businesses that have to interact with European data. And in addition, it's also kind of resulting in the once and for all like final place where data should end up. I think in the past there's always been fragmentation of where data is, and now that there are really strong like data warehouse providers where you can own the platform, you can store the data in your own platform, and then you can interoperate that data with all the other platforms. Because this now exists, I think it's becoming more clear to startups and enterprises alike that data warehouses are actually going to be the final solution for like data centralization.
Right,
And I think it gets
right,
exciting
right,
on the
right.
AI side too, because
Yeah.
each of these data warehouse players are eventually going to provide AI solutions. Some of them already have them, some of them are building it. But the good thing is that now applications are coming to the data versus data coming to the applications. So historically, you always just basically copy paste or ETL your data over to the different applications that the data needs to power, which means your data is now spread out amongst all these different clouds, and you don't own any of those clouds. The core difference now is that you are actually seeing people build the applications on top of where the data is. So you'll build the AI applications on the data itself within Databricks, or you'll build the marketing application on the data itself in Snowflake or BigQuery. And because of that core change, where applications can easily be built on the data layer rather than the other way around, it's really freeing up people from having to worry about the data governance piece.
So that is very important thing regarding the AI and ML, that now the applications are coming toward the data, and now people will be able to customize the solutions and use AI according to their business needs, right? So being a technical guy, as we understand the AI and stuff like that, I was finding the answer of this question that how generative AI is going to affect these new business
Hmm.
cases. So if I ask you, because you are dealing with the data and you are into that
Hmm.
sea, which is going to be the powerhouse in the future, right? Data is going to be the powerhouse of everything related to AI, machine learning. So if I ask you that how these business cases are going to be changed or
Hmm.
upgraded, so how would you like to?
So I think there's two ways to think about it. One is how are people doing exactly what they do today, but in a more efficient way? And the other is how are they going to do brand new things, like interact with their customers in brand new ways, right? So outside of the context of high touch, but simply how are marketing teams going to use generative AI? I think those are the two ways, right? So one is you can use generative AI to generate copy or generate images for your advertisements, generate email campaigns, to even make decisions, for example, on which campaigns to run and at what time, selling which product, right? So I think that kind of workflow already exists today, but it can be optimized much further by using AI, and it can be optimized in a more one-to-one way. So I think what our customers really get excited about is right now, I can maybe take my 100 million users and build 10 or 15 subsets of those users and run 10 or 15 campaigns against those users. Wouldn't it be so incredible if I could actually run one-to-one campaigns for all 100 million users? And each user is getting something very customized that is really perfect for them at that given time. I think that's the promise of Gen AI. The kind of one-to-one personalization would be quite impossible to do if you didn't have some sort of decision-making model that could decide what does this person need to see, right? So I think that's a good example of something you already do today, but can be further optimized or made more efficient. And same goes for like the copywriting. If you're already writing copy today, you might be able to write copy better or faster with Gen AI. Then there's the more interesting piece about like how can I interact with my customer in ways that I don't interact with them today. So a lot of luxury retail brands have this reputation of a concierge experience, right? So when you walk into a luxury retail store, you have someone who perhaps knows you by name, knows your birthday, knows your partner's name, when their birthday is, what you want to buy for them, what you bought for them in the past. They have all this information about you in their CRM because it's luxury and therefore your LTV is high enough for them to spend time in this client relationship. That kind of motion can actually be outsourced to some sort of like chatbot type experience and can even be brought digital via that chatbot type experience. And the only way to do that successfully is actually not to use just these simple foundation models that exist online, but to expose those models to the data you already have in your business. So if you have that client information, right? What has this person purchased before? What have they purchased for their partner before? Can I expose that information to my LLM such that now that chatbot can talk very specifically to this customer about the things that customer cares about with the knowledge of what they've purchased in the past? And I don't think that.
Isn't it dangerous?
Um, why do you
Isn't
think
it
so?
dangerous? Because look, if
Mhm.
the model, if
Mhm.
the chatbot knows everything about me, knows all the information about me, that is the concern the world has right now. That if we are going to give all the information to the bots, to the models, to the AI models, they can be used. They can be used for many reasons, and they can be used in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine cases that are dangerous. For example, let's
Yeah.
say someone is buying gifts for someone else other than their partner, and the partner doesn't know, right? So I can definitely imagine cases where that's dangerous. But
No, that is one thing. But what I believe is that because generative AI is going to change everything, how we interact, how we deal with the things, how we do things. As you said, that we are going to interact with our customers
mhm,
in new ways, right? So I agree with that. But the thing is, there are two type of people, good and bad, right? Good people are going to use it for the good purpose, and the bad people, they are going to use it for the bad reasons. And I believe our society dynamics will
mhm,
completely change. We will have new challenges, we will have new system, we will have to face a lot in this
mhm,
disruption, because this is going to disrupt each and every
mhm,
aspect of our life. And those aspects include each and everything: how we interact with our family, how we interact with our friends, how we interact with our
mhm.
shopping habits, each and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a case to be made that the same way social media might have changed how we
Yeah,
socialize and how we interact with each
yeah,
other.
yeah,
I think
exactly.
there's a case to be made that Gen AI may do something similar. But I honestly like I don't think
Um,
I
then
see yet what the danger is there. I think I see like the same risk
thing.
you would see where like any real like technology shift happens, and now capitalism will encourage that
Yeah.
technology shift to continue, right? So like
Yeah.
ultimately, what do we get? We get more efficiency in how we work, so people can maybe do like more interesting work. We get new interaction patterns, but if you look at those interaction patterns today, the majority of consumers are not interacting with Gen AI. They still prefer to interact with like the typical shopping experience or the typical communications experience. And I think you're right. Like the danger comes from situations where maybe there's a bad actor and they want to develop some sort of like friendship type companion type Gen AI, and now people have online friends that are not real people and they're just bots. So I could see how like human society could spiral. But I think like it's this problem existed far before Gen AI with social media and other things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that aspect that these problems were there in different form earlier, and now there will be a
Yeah,
different form
and
of
maybe they'll be
those
more powerful.
problems. So I agree with that. And uh, your one point is 100% correct that it's all about
Mhm.
the actor. It's all about the actor who is going to
Yeah, and I
use
think
it. It
this
is
is why
dependent
like a
on
lot of
that.
folks believe in regulation and like law, right? Because
Yes, yes,
ultimately,
yes.
capitalism will always favor what makes money.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some sort of governing body that counteracts that.
So it's the same thing that with with a lot of internet activities, there comes the
Hmm.
cyber laws. So similarly, they are going to be enhanced more. They are going to be more updated according to the situations. But I think that this disruption will be the largest disruption of
Interesting.
our lives. What do you think
Yeah, I
about
think
that?
time will tell. I think my I think
Yeah.
the thing I feel more sure about is that this disruption will lead to many more disruptions, and that this is just the
Yes,
beginning, right?
I
So
agree.
I don't think what we are seeing today is the final state, but because it's the tip of the iceberg, I agree with you. And like the reason I feel this way is
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
LLMs are still a very small portion of what AI has the capability of achieving.
You know,
And if you look at GPTs, right, like
uh,
LLMs are just a specific application of GPTs, but you can actually use GPTs for like many more
yeah,
applications that
I
are more
agree.
typical AI, and potentially even more useful.
And yeah, I agree with that. That aspect that it's just an iceberg and there's a lot more to come. That I
And
agree
for that, we're going to need
100%.
folks to innovate that are not simply applying LLMs to existing use cases. So someone has to take that GPT model and say, I want to build
Yeah,
something outside of LLMs using the general purpose transformer and see what interesting applications may exist there.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's move forward and on another stuff regarding team building. Let's talk
Sure.
about the team building. When you are building your team, what are the key points you are looking into those people, and how do you build your
Yeah. So I
teams?
think I was thinking about this a little bit before I joined the podcast. Um, I think agency is the number one thing you look for, especially in early stage startup employees. So when you think agency, you think if you give this person something, will they go to every length possible to figure it out and achieve it to the best of their ability? Or are they going to wait for you to ask them, was it done? Are they going to wait for you to give them a next step and give them direction? And I think there's a huge difference between people that you have to consistently manage and motivate and provoke versus the people that have very high agency, because those people that have high agency can take any abstract task and get to a very similar or even better conclusion than you would be able to get to if you were to spend all of your time on it. And so I think like it's very interesting because folks want to hire engineers and other startup employees with very high experience. And I think as an early stage company, you struggle to hire the person with the most experience because you can simply not attract that kind of talent. And in fact, I would actually make a claim that it's worse for you to hire the person with more experience. You'd prefer to hire the person that has high agency, extremely high just hunger, and the the ability to learn and figure things out. So they have high slope. And we have that kind of like hiring principle at Hightouch, which is that we hire for slope more than we do for y-axis. And what we mean by this is we judge people by where they were and where they have come since then. So have they been growing year over year and progressing, whether it's in their career or in their skill set? So like I think like our VP of engineering Corey taught me this a long time ago. He said, let's say you hired the Stanford engineer that worked at Google and then afterwards worked at Facebook. On paper, that looks like a very good resume, but in reality, their slope is kind of flat because going from Stanford to Google is actually not terribly difficult, and going from Google to Facebook is also not terribly difficult. But say you hire the UC Santa Cruz engineer that was the 10th hire at a startup, got promoted to senior engineer, then joined another startup as the 30th employee, got promoted to staff in the same number of years, in 4 years. You'll still always choose that engineer that worked at two companies where the names were not well known, but they got promoted and grew very quickly in their career. And now they're an architect rather than an entry level software engineer.
That that is so interesting, and I agree with that because uh, I tell people that when you are working, when it is your first job, I tell them that you should try to go into some startup or a small
Yeah.
company, because I believe that in the small companies you have the maximum possibilities of learning. Your learning curve goes exponentially high, and from the small companies you learn the techniques or ways of surviving, and from the large companies you learn the
Yep.
processes. So that is what I tell people, that if you are going into a large company, you are going to learn the process, you are not going to learn the ways of
Mm-hmm.
surviving. But if you are working in a startup environment, you are learning hell a
Yeah,
lot of
and more than you
things.
realize.
You are learning things that even you
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly what you're saying. People often don't realize just the effect of who you are surrounded by, right? So where you grow up, who you went to school with, who you then worked with in your first few jobs. It's easy to claim that I want to learn the process of a big company like Google, so that way I can learn how big companies work, right? But what you often forget is that by surrounded by all these folks, I will eventually become like them. Versus if I'm surrounded by early stage startup folks, I'll eventually become like them, which means I will figure out how to find the shortest path to getting something done, and I will figure out how to optimize. And so I think it's like
Yeah, that makes a lot of
the things that are not on paper that are more cultural are maybe as important, if not more important, than the skills that you get. And those are extremely difficult to quantify. Like no one can say what cultural skills they
yeah.
got from working in a startup, but you can simply see it when you talk to them.
Yeah, I get it. Because you're from Haryana,
Hmm.
right? So you must know Punjabi as
No,
well.
my dad knows Punjabi, but I never learned Punjabi, just Hindi.
Okay, okay, okay. Just Hindi, right, right. I thought you might know the word
I know Jugar,
Jugar.
of course.
Yeah, so basically
Exactly.
the people from Asia, India, Pakistan,
Yep.
Bangladesh, right? So we people are experts
Yep.
in Jugar, right? And Jugaad is the most important thing in a
Yeah.
startup
And
environment.
that's it's like very
Right?
similar to this concept of like fake it till you make it. So
Yeah,
startup founders have to have some
of course.
concept of that.
And because our circumstances, our society, our issues are so pathetic, right? We had to do
Mhm.
those things in our daily life. So when we are doing business, of course, we are going to use all what we have learned all our lives, right? And we are going to implement that in our business,
Yeah, I mean,
make our own ways.
I 100% agree with you, but I just want to push on one thing, which is that the circumstances that you experienced shaped you into who you are today, and you could,
Yes, yes, yes. That is what
yeah,
I'm
and you can
saying.
never become who you are today without those circumstances. So you could have a lot more
Yeah,
privilege, never need to have
yeah,
Jugaad in any way or form, but then you won't be who you are today, right?
yeah.
And I'll just give a quick example. So for 14 years, as I grew up, I watched my dad run a gas station. In Atlanta, he had this
Sorry.
gas station he ran. He went there every single Friday and Saturday. And so he was working all week and then working at the gas station 2 days a week as well. And in that, I think I experienced business for the first time. Right, growing up, typically you don't really
Mm,
see what it looks like to run a business, but through that, I was learning. I was seeing what accounting looked like. I was seeing what like customer relationships look like, and I was seeing him work hard. So in the gas
mm.
station business, there's a lot of jugaad that you have to do in order to get by,
Yeah.
and it starts at an early age.
So it happens. It happens when your family is talking about the business in the home. Even if I do have my family has a
Hmm.
transport business, right? So when they are home, of course, they are talking to each other about the vehicles and what happened and how they are going to resolve it. Although I'm in a software business, but I do have that much knowledge that all their hi-fi
Hmm.
meetings, I attend
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
meetings and I crack the deals
Nice.
for them because I know the ins and outs of the transport.
Mhm.
Although I have never
Wow,
been there, but I know the information. So whenever there is a meeting like in which they they think that they need someone who can
hmm,
convince, they send me that okay, you go there
that's
and
awesome.
do
So
it.
you're like kind of like
So
the
it
sales
happens a
team.
lot. sales team who is working
Yeah,
free of cost from last many years.
yeah. That's awesome.
Families in India exploiting the
Of course.
relationships.
I mean, you have to have some way to give back to them, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. I'm happy to do that. Okay, let's talk about the
Yeah.
remote work. Of course, your company is 100% remote. So let's talk about the pros and cons of remote work and be honest, be blunt, be honest. The issues you face, the
Hmm.
positives of remote work, anything.
So we hired pretty much all of our headcount during COVID. And so we didn't have the option of being remote or being in person. Remote was the only option. At the start of 2021, we were 4 people. And at the end of 2021, we were about 40. And then the end of 2022, we were about like almost 100. So we did hire pretty much everyone during the span of COVID. And so we fell into this. And there's a few benefits. So, for example, we're able to hire like kind of the top staff in any part of the US. We never really expanded that much outside of the US. We now do have people in London and Hong Kong, and a few other parts of Europe. But typically, like we've just hired anywhere in the US. But what this allowed us to do is there are sometimes extremely good engineers that are not in San Francisco, and we're now easily able to hire them. So a lot of our engineering staff today is actually in like Southern California or New York, and they're also able to move freely between those cities. And so being able to hire folks that are kind of top tier in different cities has been really helpful. And even if you look at like some of our top early hires, our very first hire, Ernest, he's been living in Hong Kong for the past like 3 years. In the first year or two, he was working here in person, and then he moved back to Hong Kong, and he's been working remotely since then. And he now manages 2 engineering teams from,
Right, right.
and all these
That's
engineers are in
awesome.
the U.S. that he
Yeah,
manages. Um,
right,
so
right, right. So, what was the reason why you were not hiring outside the US in the early
We
stages?
wanted as much cohesivity and like ability to make decisions as possible. So our perspective is like instead
Mm,
of having more staff, we wanted to have fewer staff that was very, very like skilled. Senior.
capable.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I think in the early stages you want to maintain that flexibility because you want to have folks that can change the product roadmap. In the beginning, we didn't even hire any product managers. We only had engineers, and the engineers would talk directly to the customers, and they would be able to change the roadmap on the fly. So in order to do that, you can't
Right,
have
right,
layers
right.
of management, and you can't have like, junior engineers that need to be told exactly how the spec looks. The person talking to the customer has to write the spec,
Right.
has to write the code. So it's all one person, right? And so we basically
That
made that
makes
trade-off, and we continued to do that even until now because even now all of our engineers are pretty much working on new products. Very few are maintaining
sense.
existing code or doing bug fixes. Um, And
That's
so,
nice.
so I think that was the original impetus for keeping it in the US. But we didn't feel like engineering had to collaborate in person. We felt like actually engineers were even more productive if they're able to work from home when they want to work from home. And we still consistently do it this way.
Right.
On the other hand, I think some of the drawbacks that we've seen is when you're onboarding new employees, it really helps to have them in person for the first week or two. And so we've been able to bring
And
people in person for those kinds of onboardings. And the other drawback we see is it's difficult for people to feel like emotionally close to each other and feel like one team if they're all working in different parts of the world. So if you only meet people over Zoom, it's very
yeah,
difficult to A, meet people outside of your own team, and B, ask people like just tougher questions that you'd want to ask over Slack if you don't know them in person. And so we started doing 2 onsites a year. So twice a year, we invite everyone to San Francisco, and it's the full company, regardless of where you live in the world. And they really just get to like hang out with each other, get to know each other, and become friends. And what we see from that is afterwards,
that makes
these
sense.
folks are now able to message each other anything because they know that the person on the other side of the screen is a nice person who cares about them. It just makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Um, and so we're gonna have our
Yeah.
next one in March, and we're really looking forward to that.
So, am I invited to that one?
I wish we could invite you, but you'd have to join Hightouch. If you're joining.
That is going to be tough, buddy. Because you do not hire outside US, so that is going to be
That's true.
tough.
Yeah. I think yeah, it's a fair point. Yeah, I think on your question too, like there's, I think the interesting thing is if you were to ask me in that long term, I think a company like Hightouch can be run remote, especially the engineering team. But I think
Yeah,
like net for like companies as a whole, I think remote work actually is quite destructive. And I think there
right.
used to be
Mm. People, yeah, go
there's
ahead,
something
go
you
ahead, go
lose,
ahead.
right? People used to have this kind of relationship with their
Yeah,
work that was very much like
right,
kind of the center of what they are doing, the people they hang out with, their social
right.
experience, um, the city they live in. It's
Uh, That I agree. That I totally agree. And people are eventually doing that. Many people, which because it's been more than 10 years, I'm working. I'm Our whole agency is providing staff
Mhm,
augmentation and services
mhm,
like that. So there was a time people were preferring
mhm.
remote work because they were seeing a lot of benefits and all the stuff. But these days, people are shifting back toward the
Employees.
on-site work, and they are shifting it toward that because there are, of course, there are some problems with that with the remote work. uh, Let it be sometimes communication, let it be sometimes the empathy between the
Mhm.
employees, between the team, right? So these kind of things are there. So now I can see a lot of companies, a lot of people, they are moving toward the
Yeah.
on-site instead of remote.
I see that as well. So I think like the way we kind of solve for this is we have two offices. We have one in San
Uh,
Francisco and one in North
yeah,
New York, and then we have like other like hubs. So we have
yeah,
a Denver hub and North Carolina hub. And by having these
yeah,
kinds of four hubs and like two offices, people that want in person can have that experience and come in person. So the New York office for example, is always
yeah,
full and there's always people there. And people that want to work remote, they can do
and
that as well. So it's really you choose what you want. And the people that like to come, they
yeah,
will all meet each other and like have that kind of social experience, right? So I think we've solved for
yeah. That's a good model.
yeah. I think at least like it kind of gives you like best of both worlds in some ways. But I do think like what you're describing,
Yeah,
where folks will crave that in-person experience, we're going to see more and more companies kind of move in that direction, and especially bigger ones. So I think like what I was trying to get at is what relationship do people have with their work? Because of remote work, and especially because of COVID, we were seeing people think of their work as a 9 to 5. And we were seeing them say that, all right, well, work is
hmm,
one part of my life, but I have all these other parts of my life. And I think for some people that really worked and it gave them more fulfillment. For other people, I think it actually gave them less fulfillment because they wanted to really dive deep into something. And for those folks,
yeah.
they'll want to have that in person experience where they can kind of really dive deep into something and give it their all.
That was a very good analysis of remote work. Okay, let's move forward toward the last part. Uh, Instead of that, when was the last time you visited India?
December 2021. Yeah.
December 2021. Uh, while the World Cup?
I don't know. I think no, World Cup was 2022.
No, 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 no. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, how often do you visit that?
I think I visit about every 4 years, so not as often.
Every
Yeah.
for right, right, right. Okay, I just wanted to know this so that I can know I can know more about India because I visited
Mhm.
New Delhi, and it was the time when we were allowed to have visa.
Oh yeah,
These,
got
these
it.
days are diplomacy issues and politics.
And sports.
That is just disturbing. Yes. So okay, let's move forward toward the last part, and I want you to give some advice to the aspiring entrepreneurs who are going to start their own businesses, who are going to build their own products, how they can do that, what are the key things they need to remember.
Yeah, so I guess I very consistently say this, so it's nothing new. But anyone that's thinking about getting started, my number one advice is just get started. I think people are always focused on what preparation they need, or what skills they need, or what experience they need in order to get started. And generally, my feeling is that when a human being is faced with the next challenge or next problem, they will figure it out. If they're not faced with that challenge or problem, they're not going to figure it out because there's no reason or motivation to figure it out. And so my advice is always get started as soon as possible. If especially if there's something that is motivating you and driving you. Um, I think the people that delay the longest eventually don't start at all. So that's the number one thing. And then outside of that, there I think like there's a lot of resources out there that say like here's all the different things you need to know, and I think a lot of those resources should be questioned because right now I think we're like finally seeing new types of businesses outside of the typical SaaS model that are very exciting, right? So like if you look at the majority of way people have made money in history, it's always been through some sort of commerce, physical goods, marketplaces, etc. And only very recently has it been SaaS. So I would just encourage people to like just follow their own first principles in terms of what they think a business should look like and go chase that because not every single business needs to be venture scale or like founded with like venture capital money. And there's a lot of good ideas folks can work on that are like a step one, right? So you can maybe you start like a set of shops, then you grow that into more, and then eventually start a multinational brand out of that. But a lot of the big businesses we see today were that kind of beginning, like whether it's like Chipotle or Sweetgreen, they didn't have this kind of plan to become a multinational company in the early days. So that's just my opinion is like question the existing models that people are so focused on and just get started because generally the thing that is nagging at you and has been in your mind or in your heart is the thing that you should work on.
I think that is the most important thing as well. Once you start, you face challenges and then eventually
Yeah.
you make it if you're
And ask
consistent.
anyone when they learned the fastest, right? They didn't learn the fastest when they had a secure paying job and they were learning on the side. They learned the fastest when shit hit the fan and they had to learn.
Yeah, when they were
Exactly.
forced to learn.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Kashish, for joining us. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching our podcast and keep watching, keep subscribing so that we can keep bringing more tech stars to your screens. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.